Today we're talking with Nate and Allie. This is a young couple that, if I understood this correctly, you both started out as believers. I think you were already married as believers, and then kind of somehow fell away from the faith, so to speak.
We weren't strong believers. I mean, I guess you could say my belief was strong, but I didn't think that God was moral. I didn't want God to be true, but I firmly believed that God was real, and I just wanted to stay away from the topic. What about you, Nate?
For me, honestly, I don't even think I ever truly believed it. Even as a kid, I mean, I grew up being taught that he was real, and we went to church every single week, every day, almost every Sunday, I mean. And so, but I just never was truly convinced. I was just like, oh, my parents believe it, so it must be true, right? But I never truly believed for myself. I mean, but I wouldn't have called myself an atheist then. I mean, I've only really considered myself an atheist for about a year, maybe, or less. So that's how I was. So.
Yeah, like you, I believed what my parents told me. Is, my family told me that God is a conclusively proven scientific fact, and that it would be as silly to question whether there is a God as it would be to question whether there is really a president, or do we just have a puppet up there and we're actually being run by the Illuminati? Which is actually much more plausible. But if you make a suggestion like that, it's sounding crazy.
Yeah.
Right.
But I didn't believe out of faith, and that was the thing for me. I didn't know that faith was required, and that was kind of the reason that I got out, was when I found out what faith really was. And a lot of people tell me that I still don't know what faith is somehow. But anyway, you guys go on. Tell me about what was the breaking point for you.
Well, really, like I said, I would shy away from the topic. So, because I was just so afraid of God, I spent so long really actually believing in God and thinking that I was just not predestined, and that I was pretty much made to go to hell because I would never get any response from God when I'd pray. And that was about all I would do, was just pray and read the Bible and focus on God all the time, because I was trying so hard to please God and please my parents. But so I didn't want to think about it. But then Nathaniel started researching it, and I had to hear the YouTube videos he was watching. So, Nathaniel, do you remember what made you start thinking about it?
No, I don't know exactly what made me start, but what happened was, okay, so since I was raised with like Answers in Genesis curriculum, because I was homeschooled a lot of my life, so my parents used AIG curriculum and taught that the world is 6,000, the whole universe is 6,000 years old, and God created everything in literal 6 days. And the seventh day he rested, and that's why we have a week. So that's how I was taught since I was 18 years old. Since I was born to 18, I was just taught creation science. I was never taught any like evolution or anything. The only stuff I knew about evolution is what my parents taught about what they thought it was, or what Ken Ham thought it was, So I didn't start doing research on my own until I stumbled across one of your videos. It was in my recommended, because I started, do you know the Bible Reloaded, Hugo and Jake? Yeah, I started listening to their Bible study just out of curiosity. And we were following that for a while. We were listening to all of their videos and about the Old Testament, reading through it, and that was just really eye-opening. That made me realize, okay, this is crazy. So then I started watching your videos, and I've seen like every single video you've almost uploaded, all the ones about like evolution and the sciencey stuff. So that was really interesting to me because I felt like I was actually learning something for real for once. I was like learning the truth because I was taught lies all my life.
I have a question about that. If you don't mind me jumping in there. I mean, you were taught creation. You said you never really believed in God. There's an interesting thing of reconciliation. How much did you accept of what you were told, and what was your alternate hypothesis about how did you think that things worked?
I don't know. I guess I didn't really think. That's the problem with it. I just accept. I don't know. Like, I can't remember back when I was a kid what I really believed, but it was like I remember there was one time in high school. When I went to an online school, and it was actually a public school, and there was a science curriculum that was, teaching evolution. But when I read it and like I tried to understand it, it made no sense to me. But now it does, being away from that environment. But when I was reading it then, I was probably 9th grade or 10th grade. And since it was an online school, my parents could see the curriculum because I was still at home technically. So I was reading that, and one time, I remember specifically one time my mom walked over to where I was working or doing school, and she was looking at it and reading it with me, and she basically convinced me that it's not true. Like, oh, we all just came from worms. What's the point of life if we're all just worms? What's going to stop us from murdering each other or something? Wow. If we're all worms. I'm like, well, now I would say, okay, we're not worms, we're human beings. But then I just I had no argument. I didn't know the other side to it. So I didn't know what to say. Oh, she's my parent. She must be right. Kids trust their parents.
We're all worms, so let's just go murder each other. We always see those worms murdering each other on the street.
Yeah, I've seen that reaction obviously a number of times. I mean, my own grandparents gave me the same thing when I told them as a little boy that I didn't buy the Genesis thing as being literal. I was trying to explain that I think this is a parable, and I think this is what this means. And my grandfather's reaction at the idea that there was evolution was he asked me this question. Well, then what's the meaning of life? And I remember thinking, that's completely irrelevant and a very stupid question, and it presupposes that there would be a reason.
Right.
Yeah, I always thought that the very question of there being a reason of life was as silly as, like when somebody comes out to read your fortune, and like they used to do the thing where they would spill the chicken bones, or they would spill the tea leaves, or they would do like the tarot cards, whatever is a completely random thing, and then they read what it means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, it doesn't mean anything. It just felt that way, and that was the way nature was for me. So when people bring up, how they want to have this purpose in life. I'm kind of aghast at that I don't have a choice in what my purpose of life is. If I'm going to have a purpose, I'd rather have the choice to not have a purpose to my life, or if I'm going to have one, it should be the one that I choose, and then I have to go to work to that end. But then somebody informed me that perspective is called nihilism.
Yeah, and nihilism. As we learned from your channel, apparently it's not what I always thought it was growing up.
Yeah, nor me. Yeah. So I denied being a nihilist the same way that I denied being an atheist. I was an atheist for 15 years and didn't know it because I've been lied to about what an atheist is.
Right.
So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Go on.
No, you please, you.
Okay. I never went through the phase of not knowing that I was an atheist and being an atheist. I definitely, it was just a switch. I was like, okay, well, I guess there is no God then, and I have a right to be mad about everything that religion did to me.
Do you know how rare that is? The transition from theistic belief to discarding all faith-based beliefs, or at least that one, is for most people a matter of years. I think only Ricky Gervais was like the only one that ever just like lost his faith in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just recently started watching him because we saw that one movie he did called The Invention of Lying. That one was a really good fucking movie.
I still haven't
That was
seen that. I need to get around to that.
I didn't even think it was going to be anti-religious when I clicked on it on Netflix. And I was like, oh, okay, this movie's better than I thought. He answers the door in a bathrobe and his hair long and a beard. He looking like Jesus. It was really funny.
It kind of portrays it as harmless, though, which I
Yeah.
think is not good, because religion is far from it. It's far from harmless.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily have to get into that unless you want to. And I do have another question for you, Allie.
Okay.
You said something very interesting a few minutes ago. You said that you believed in God, but you thought he was immoral. Now, I had that issue myself, and I don't remember meeting anybody else who ever did. So how did you come to that conclusion?
Well, my mom really liked to focus on God's wrath. I know that different believers like to focus on different things. My husband's mom really likes to talk about God's love and just completely ignore God's wrath. My mom likes to ignore the parts of the Bible where God sounds like he's loving, and my mom just likes to talk about the wrath. So we would just study the Old Testament over and over and over. And specifically, it was Numbers 5, because I've just always
The abortion
cared about
thing?
it. Was about abortion and the fact that it was forced abortion against the woman's will. And back then, I was really against abortion. And because I thought that they were like the same things as babies, which I know now that that's not the case. But back then, I just thought, okay, well, how could a loving God just let men force their wives to have abortions? How could a loving God force women to kill their babies? It just didn't make any sense to me. And in addition to that, there wasn't even a guarantee that the woman had actually cheated.
Right.
So I didn't think that it was moral that God would be, the gist.
Yeah.
And then also the part where God kills people for sacrificing an animal to him the wrong way. And the fact that God got upset with Cain for sacrificing or giving him the wrong type of sacrifice. And I thought, what an ungrateful God. You can't make him happy.
Well, Cain gave a vegetarian sacrifice, and that doesn't involve cruelty.
Right.
Right.
And then
There's not enough blood.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's not burnt, so that you might still be able to eat that if you don't set it on fire. There seems to be with faith so many things that you have to do to make yourself committed to the belief. I've seen people where they've structured their lives where if they turn out to be wrong, then they're absolutely screwed. And they do this to themselves on purpose to strengthen their belief, because they can't let themselves believe that they'll be screwed. They have to really, really, because if you believe hard enough, if you convince yourself firmly enough, then the reality will change because of your positive thought.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of people that were thinking like that. And it kind of goes back into the other irrational thing about, well, why would I want to believe that we're worms? Why don't we murder each other if we're worms? It makes no rational sense at all. And it's not a reason that you choose to believe something. Or I don't get a chance to choose what I believe anyway. I mean, I'm compelled by the evidence, but I've had other people tell me that I have to believe because I want to know that I'll see my father again. That was which it doesn't matter if you believe. That doesn't mean you're going to know that. But never mind. There's no point in reasoning with anybody at that point.
Right.
I would love to believe that we have souls, but I just can't logically. I mean, I would love to think that I'm going to be with my kids and my husband and the people that love me forever, but I don't see any reason to believe that.
Yeah, I remember as I gave a prayer when I was a little boy to God in the privacy of my own room, like the Bible says. I think in Matthew, where you're not supposed to be like the hypocrites and be out and pray where people can see you. You're supposed to do it in private. So I have this prayer wherein I asked God, can't I just die? You know, like you're supposed to, like like everything else does, because any form of relentless eternity, forever and ever. Just,
What could you even do forever?
Yeah, I mean, so and you don't progress, so you're just going to stagnate. You can't constantly achieve and get better. I mean, even if you could, there's only so far you can go, and we're talking about eternity here. So I'm going to be licking the sphincter of God for all eternity. That's.
As far as what I can remember from reading the Bible, isn't the only description of heaven that people are just worshiping God at his throne forever and ever? Yeah. I don't remember anything in the Bible about mansions or anything nice for the people who worship God.
My grandmother gave me the explanation about, why does she believe in. I asked her to tell me about heaven, because I'll tell you all about hell, but there's very, very little discussion about heaven. So I pried my grandmother about this, and she says, well, the streets are made of gold and we all have mansions. And right away, of course, I'm thinking, we still need shelter in heaven? Why? Why aren't we flying? Why do we need streets made of gold? It doesn't make any sense to make gold streets anyway. There's no purpose. And what's the purpose of all of us having mansions? Do I need a mansion, or do we all have like this competition keeping up with the Joneses in heaven?
I don't even want a mansion. What about the people who already have mansions on this earth?
Yeah, and they're miserable, and so is everybody that lives in that mansion with them. Yeah. So there's obviously a lot of thought that doesn't go into this.
Yeah. I was told that my mom told me that there's like this giant cube in heaven, and like that's where heaven, or like Jerusalem or something, is in heaven. It's this giant cube, and then you could go outside the cube and it's still heaven. I don't know if I'm remembering that right, but that's how I remember how she described it to me when I was a kid.
Yeah, my family didn't like to explain their positions very much, but I wanted to understand things, and they were my only source when I was a boy, back before there was an internet and all of that. And so I remember asking my grandmothers and prying with a crowbar to get out of them what it is that they believe. And eventually I got from my grandmother that she thought she held to, I think it was the Copernican model, that she thought that the Earth, the concentric circles where the Earth is literally the biggest thing in the universe and is the center of the universe. There are no galaxies. It's just everything goes around the Earth, and all the planets are about the same size. They're just on slightly, more extended circles. So the moon is in the closest one, and then Jupiter's a small little moon-sized thing somewhere else, and all of these things are pathetically small. And the sun goes around the Earth as well. And that's actually what she believed. And that's in the 20th century.
Wow. That's crazy.
I've since run into quite a few people who hold that idea. If not the Copernican model like that, they hold to this other one, which is a sort of geocentrism where the entire universe rotates the Earth. The Earth is the center of the entire universe, and literally everything goes around the Earth.
Oh, and the Earth is flat.
And there are people who hold that position too, and that the reason that they do, so far as I've been able to ascertain, the descriptions that I've got, is that science can't explain a flat Earth. So they rely on a couple of different fallacies here. One of them is the God of the gaps. That science can't explain it, that means it's proof for God. Obviously, logically fallacious. That's not the case, but that's the way they want to believe. And then they have the thing about if you make believe hard enough, if you lie to yourself enough, you can convince yourself of the lie. And if you can convince yourself the world is flat, then you can convince yourself that science can't explain that, and that means that God had to do it. And that's how you reaffirm your faith.
That's funny. I remember when my father-in-law was starting to toy with the idea of a flat Earth, my mother-in-law told him that that was demonic. She gave him a big lecture on how the flat Earth theory is demonic.
Yeah, my mom told my dad that I was there to see it. He was in this big flat Earth like conspiracy phase. It was kind of interesting, the arguments he came up with, but obviously they're easily refuted. But it was just interesting, probably to him too. I don't think he ever really wanted to believe it. It was just he was in this phase, but who knows? He probably would have eventually if my mom didn't stop him. So my mom came up to him and was like, "You need to stop looking at all these theories. I feel like they're demonic." I just think it's so funny because most flat earthers are Christian or believe God made it flat.
Yeah, there are some Muslim flat earthers as well, and I've seen the arguments direct from the Quran. And since I started reading the Quran, I've gotten an awful lot of amusement out of it because man, is that a dumb book. It's got all of the errors that the Bible has in it, and then it's got amplified because it's got a whole bunch more. Mm-hmm. So that's a bucket of chuckles to read that. So you guys are fortunate in that you never had, either of you, the addiction, the need to have that belief that other people, for whatever reason, they've got to believe that. I never had a need to believe anything. I just wanted to know. Yeah.
I don't understand. I don't even understand why people need to believe something, even when they know it's true or false. When they know it's not true, they still choose to believe it. And
have you ever had anybody admit that to you, that that's the case?
No, not yet.
Okay,
I'm sure it is like that for my parents. I mean, I've talked to them about it. They know I'm atheist, so they never really admitted explicitly that they are like that. But, well, you, Allie.
Well, I think it's pretty cool that your mom actually at least tried to make sense of the Bible by using answers in Genesis. She tried to make it be scientific. My mom just pretty much tried to steer me away from science. I was told that I pretty much wouldn't understand science, and I did get a short time where I was allowed to learn about science through Bob Jones University's curriculum. No. Yeah. Even my Christian grandmother said, "Oh no," when she found out that I was using Bob Jones. I was homeschooled as well. First, I was in a Christian school, and that was just awful. So I was pulled out of it because they have this thing where they just pick on one kid in each grade level, and I was that kid. So I was pulled out of the Christian school and taken into homeschooling. And at first we did Christian homeschooling with Bob Jones. And I actually thought that it was really interesting. And the first atheist that I ever met was during that time period. And it it kind of gave a bad name to atheism because, first of all, he was 17 years old. I was 12, going on 13. He was trying to date me, and in addition to that, he was trying to turn me atheist, and I would win the debates against him. I would reduce him to just saying no, no, no. And I still know all those arguments. They're just fallacies. They're the same things that, well, Answers in Genesis uses. And so I just think it's crazy that he wasn't able to debunk those. Apparently he didn't know stuff. And I'm sorry, what was the topic that I was originally trying to go to? I went down a rabbit trail.
Yeah, I don't know where you were headed. I was just kind of in the cart and riding along.
Weren't you were talking about your mom?
Yes, that it was pretty much anti-science. My mom just didn't want me focusing on science at all. I think she saw me getting too into it. And so then she pulled me out and took me and put me in a public school online. And it was pretty bad. Their curriculum was pretty bad as well. They said the first religion ever was Judaism. The first religion, not just the first monotheistic religion, which would also be false. But so they really catered to Christians there too. And so I didn't really know much about atheism or science in general. But I did spend years from like 6th grade to, I'm hearing an echo of myself. Is anyone else hearing an echo of me?
No, I know I'm not picking it up.
Okay, good. Anyway, what was I saying?
Yeah, 6 years. I'm kind of you spent 6 years in after going to public school.
6 years of just pretty much staying in my bedroom because I wasn't able to leave my room without getting in trouble for one thing or another. Usually for listening to secular music, it was a big deal, a huge deal. I couldn't listen to secular music. I couldn't wear makeup without my mom saying that it was slutty. There was just a lot. Pretty much anytime I'd leave my room, I'd get in trouble for something. So I would stay in my room and pray to God for some friends and pray to God that maybe he would fix my relationship with my parents, and nothing. I would never get any answer from God. I would pray and say, okay, well, maybe you could send me a shooting star. Because I mean, like I had heard so many people say that they did that, and then they saw a shooting star and they knew God was real. So I nothing would happen. God wouldn't send me anything. And I would be like, okay, well, maybe I'm just not reading my Bible enough for God. Maybe I need to read my Bible more, and then God will pay attention to me. And so upon reading more of the Bible, I came to the conclusion that, oh, well, maybe I am not predestined. Maybe God decided, fuck her. Maybe God decided, okay, she's just gonna go to hell. That's my plan for her.
This leads to a quick aside question. Since you mentioned predestination, I mean, I'm curious about what part of the country you're in, and also what religion you were both brought up in.
Well, he and I are both from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we were both.
I've heard bad things.
Oh,
yeah. Black Hawk Christian Church for both of us.
Which church?
Black Hawk Christian.
Okay.
David Jeremiah, I think, founded it. Am I correct, Nate?
Who?
Dr. David Jeremiah, isn't he the one? Black Hawk?
I could look it up.
So what denomination would Blackheart?
I think it's Baptist.
Baptist.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I was expecting that with the predestination thing that it was probably different. I don't know. I figured there were specific denominations that focus on that. Like the way the Calvinists do, where they decide that God already knows who's going to go to heaven and hell, and it doesn't matter what anybody does. But you can be as rotten as you want to, and if you were chosen to go to heaven, you're going to go to heaven. And period. Interesting way of thinking about that. Why don't they go out and murder each other?
I don't know. Probably because they're not worms.
Okay, so continue if you would. If I didn't completely take you off the rails when you mentioned the thing about predestination and then that God has just decided that he's just going to waste you for whatever reason.
Well, I was almost done, pretty much. From that point, this is funny. My mom always told me that if people reached out to Satan, that Satan would listen. And so I actually tried. I was like, okay, well, if God doesn't want me, then maybe I'll try to summon Satan. So I did. And Satan didn't come. Like, no, not Satan, not God.
It's pretty bad when you can't even trust the devil.
I know. It's terrible. And so I tried with Wicca, and that didn't work out. But I thought, well, maybe I'm just not believing hard enough. I couldn't convince myself to believe hard enough to make anything work with Wicca. So then I just quit with religion and with trying to debunk religion, because I just had it in my mind that God's there, and I just don't want God to be there. So any evidence I find will just be made up because I don't want God to exist.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting perspective, because we hear that a lot. I mean, that you just don't want there to be a God, or you just hate, or you believe in God but you hate God or whatever. And I think honestly, you're the first person that I've ever met that actually might apply to. I thought that God was immoral, and I thought that God needed to explain to himself, because there was an awful lot that was being put down in his name that was, and I was expecting that in the answer to my prayer is God was going to come up and explain how the Bible got him all wrong, how he's not really like that. It's just people wrote that. And I can honestly say that prayer was answered, because for the rest of my life, I saw that people got all that wrong because they just made it up.
Right.
Yeah, even if I still believed in God, even if there is a God, the Bible is still false, and so is the Quran. And God could not even come into existence and correct any of that. Those things are still wrong anyway. So
Right.
What is it? What now for you?
I don't believe in the supernatural at all. So I'm an atheist. And I am involved with the Satanic Temple just for a sense of community, and because, hey, it's cool. It's my artistic version of atheism.
Yeah, I actually have to applaud the Satanic Temple for a lot of their defense of the First Amendment. Their constitutional defenses in the law. Brilliant. I know that when Lucian Greaves took over that organization, the prior people seemed to be upset about the direction that it was going, and I can see that. But they really did make a good name for themselves in defending the Constitution the way they have. I always said I can't be Satanist because, first of all, I'm not young and cute enough, and two, I can't afford the wardrobe.
Oh, boy.
Well, you got the hair and the face for it.
I wouldn't say that we're all young and cute.
Okay.
I mean, look at Lucian Greaves.
Yeah, well, I've met some fantastic looking Satanists. I'm very
Oh, yeah.
impressed with it. I mean, just talk about a look. Wow, you guys look great.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they do tend to have a pretty cool look.
So I think maybe we can probably cut it off here. I just wanted to get a final word from you guys about where you feel that you are and where you're going.
Well, at this point, I am out of the closet about my atheism and my involvement with the Satanic Temple, with my family and my husband's family. It's been quite a ride. It's been a journey of people being confused and upset with us, and personally offended when I'm not trying to personally offend anyone. I don't believe in their God. But we are trying to make a better name for atheism, at least within our own circle. And we are parents. I think I mentioned that a little bit, but it's a really big thing for us to make sure that our kids don't get the damaging effects of religion that we've had. And that can be really difficult with our family members who think that their grandchildren are going to hell if they don't witness to them. And it's against my rules for them to be telling them that if they don't follow Jesus, then they're going to hell. I have 2 3-year-old girls and 1 18-month-old girl. And so right now they're at a really impressionable age. That's about the age I became a Christian at 4 years old. I thought that I already was a Christian, but I found out, if you don't make this certain prayer, you're going to hell. So I just don't want the same things happening to them that happened to me. And I don't know. Nathaniel, what do you have to say? Where do you feel like we're at? Where do you feel like we're going?
Well, right now I feel like I'm just in like the infancy of understanding and learning about the world. I mean, I know a lot about evolution and biology because that's the one thing that I'm really interested in, but there's just so much more to learn, and it's funny, after I graduate school, I'm more interested in learning as an adult than I was as a kid. And I wish I was more interested in learning back then, but that's how it is. So I just really want to keep learning about the world and learn the facts and learn the truth and teach my own kids how to critically think and how to be rational. And, I would even teach them about, religion, but not in a way that's like my parents did. I would teach them, yeah, this is Christianity. This is what they believe. Here's Islam. Here's Judaism. Here's Flying Spaghetti Monster. There's just so many different religions. And
Zoroastrianism and Hinduism are good ones to look into.
Yeah. I've looked into Hinduism a little bit. I've seen their crazy beliefs and gods. It's like, how many gods do they have?
I don't think that there's a certain number, but
it's like they make one up a day or something.
instead of a holy book, they have a library.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, the Hindu religion is enormous. It has so many works in it. The Adventures of Lord Krishna alone is a library.
Wow.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just want to make sure my kids get the best parenting and the best love they can get, and not be indoctrinated at all, because that's just seems like child abuse to me. It's like, I can see in them their curiosity just blows up whenever they learn something new. They just love learning about things. They love learning about the world they're born in, and every kid just naturally has this tendency to learn about where they're born in on this earth, you know. And it just seems like, oh no, you don't need to learn about that. That's not true. God did it, you know. It just seems to me, it feels like you're just blocking that part of the brain out. It's making them not think, you know.
It is true that if you indoctrinate children at this impressionable age, that you can stunt their ability to think rationally or critically, examine anything. I mean, for the rest of their lives, they may never develop that ability again.
Wow.
Yeah.
I still find myself realizing that I am brainwashed in more ways than I knew. I found that I stayed conservative politically for a lot longer than I was a Christian. And then I realized, oh, I'm still thinking of fetuses as fully formed babies. And then I realized that I still was thinking like we had souls. And I'm sure that I still have other things that I need to debunk that are going on in my head right now. I just don't know.
Right.
All right. Well, Nate and Allie, thank you very much for telling me your story. Best of luck to both of y'all.
Thanks for listening.
It's funny. I've been to a lot of different states in this country, but when I mark out all the states I've been to, it's strangely that Indiana pops up as like one I've never seen.
Oh wow.
It's worth seeing if you're interested in
Gas
crazy
station.
religion. If you're interested in crazy religion, this is definitely the place to go.
Okay. Well, maybe somebody will bring me up there at some point, but I don't. Good talking to you guys. Best of luck to you. Good luck with your
Good
kids
talking to you.
and all that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.